we were going up there, not only helping them out in that way, but we were showing them like, hey, dude, we're in this with you.
Yeah.
Like, let's go.
Like this makes, on paper, this makes all the sense in the world, obviously. I see why you did it. But was there, because you're kind of entering that gray area of technically not doing the 800 meters back thing, is this where there started to be like guys in the platoon, like, we're not supposed to be doing this?
Yeah, I think, I think from the get-go, when we showed up, like I talked about, we only had about 2 or 3 days, and then it was like, go. And like I said, it was definitely a chaotic environment, dude. Like, we had our partner force. There was also probably 3 other partner force elements out there that belonged to another platoon or, an ODA platoon. And then there was just like regular Iraqi police that were out there clearing. So you had all these elements that you had to keep track of. We use these ATACs. So we would look on our phones, and a lot of the partner force would have these beacons on them, so you could tell where they were on the battle space. But then the problem was they would get killed, then ISIS would have the beacons. And so you were like, well, we don't know if this is ISIS or what. So it was just one of those, like, figuring it out was definitely drinking from a fire hose for the first couple weeks of like, all right. But once we got into a groove and we knew what we were doing, we started pushing forward. And there was some pushback. First things first is we were going out every day. And like I said, we were living in shitty living conditions. But what I did was, like I described before, how we would just take these mortars every day. I brought the whole platoon out probably for the first 4 or 5 days. And then I realized, I'm like, this is stupid. There's too many, we have too much of a footprint out here. So I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to split the platoon in half. Half the platoon went back to, remember I talked about that mansion?
Yes.
In Erbil. Yes. I sent half the platoon back to Erbil and was like, hey, you guys are going to go back, rest and refit for a week. Then you will come change out with the other half of the platoon. And then they will get to go rest and refit for a week. Myself, the OIC, and I think 2 other individuals, we stayed out there the whole time. So that right there, I think, caused some issues, unbeknownst to me at the time. I thought I was like doing them a favor, or just being like, hey, just makes sense. But what happens is these guys would go back and rest and refit, and they'd bitch about whatever, because there was no one there to control the bitching. It was just like I call them hate circles, right? They're just like, oh, they start complaining and they all get, riled up.
Did you see this in your previous years in other platoons? Did you ever see stuff like that happen?
Yeah, dude, yeah. I mean, here's the thing. If guys aren't bitching, then they're plotting, right? So it's fine. It's like, if they're complaining, great. You only allow it to get to a certain point, and then you have to squash it and be like, you shut the fuck up. Like, this is the job.
Yeah.
So, I've seen before, and when I was part of it, we called it the E5 Mafia. You're in the E5 Mafia, you think you know it all, and you're like complaining about the leadership and blah, blah, blah. And it's just natural. It happens, right? But the thing is, it never gets like unprofessional. It stays within the E5 Mafia, and that's it. It doesn't like go outside the platoon or even to the leadership.
Yeah.
So this is sort of like what was going on.
But by the way, real quick, like when I look at your story after the fact, as you're going to go through this and drop the details, once I really learned what actually happened, which was, I think the first one I saw was Sean Ryan's podcast on that, which was excellent. I was like, holy shit, you can't just believe what you hear on TV. But,
yeah.
There were so many little things, like teeny tiny things, and you'll end up describing some of them, where it's like, in hindsight, nothing was wrong there. But you could see how that then looks if you just take that and lift that and say, oh, but he did this.
Yeah.
Like there's these little moments where I'm just thinking to myself as a human, and I'm like, I would never think anything of that. And then you see it in some different, like, lit up context. Like if you're in the bar and you see a lot of ugly girls, but like you go like this and one of them looks hotter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's almost like, or looks uglier once you see it because she looked hot because all the other ones were ugly. Like it's almost like that with your story.
It's a bunch of tiny little red flags that really I didn't think were that big of a deal. And like I've said this in other podcasts, dude, I give them the benefit of the doubt as far as they had never been to combat, and then they get thrown into this.
Yeah.
And it was a very chaotic and kinetic deployment. But the amount of like atrocity, like the amount of atrocities that were witnessed on that deployment, I had never seen. And I'd seen my fair share, and ISIS was like on another level.
What kinds of things did you see?
Well, just to like give you, so even the partner force. So this wasn't an American-led war, right? We were there doing advising, assisting, and accompanying. So the Iraqis were like the lead. We lived with them, and so where we live in this house was attached to another room that the Iraqis had, and that was their torture chamber. So we went to bed every night listening to ISIS just like get raped, tortured, killed. I mean, it was like normal. It was like, okay, which was kind of weird, but nobody, it was sort of like, oh, this is happening, but whatever.
It's not our jurisdiction.
Nobody, yeah, I don't, it was like, what are we going to report, you know? And then on the flip side of that is as we're, clearing through Mosul, I mean, it wasn't uncommon. Like when I talked about going to recon areas, like you have to climb over mounds of dead bodies to get into buildings. They would pile up women and kids. And then they would,
pile up women and kids.
Yeah. Dead bodies to block off, entrances. And then at one point we had pulled into it was like downtown near the museum in Mosul, but there was a park and there was kids' heads on spikes. Kids. Yeah. Decapitated kids' heads on spikes. And then they would, a couple times they'd probably be like 300 or 400 meters away from us and with a field in front of us. And then they would send out a group of like 15 women and kids, some men, sprinting towards us and then mow them down. And like they were trying to get us to come out of our position to go help, which it worked. The Iraqis, the partner force, would go out there and try and help them, and they would get smoked. So this is the kind of shit that was happening, and this was like normal. Like it just became, it was like, yep, this is the environment we're in. This enemy is, they don't give a shit about anything.
Your guy Ephraim was actually there at the same time.
Yes.
He had just left the SEALs. You ever see that video?
He was there, so so here's a funny story. The guy Ephraim was working with
it's like a human
ranger.
rights.
Yeah, he was a ranger, but then he started Burma.
Yeah, he's got his own organization with
yes.
that. Yeah.
I actually was wrecking a place one time, and I turn and there's a truck coming, a pickup truck, and I'm like, what the fuck? And I saw it was a white dude in there, and he stopped and he was like, hey, and it was a guy who I was like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, we're up front. They're on the front line, like saving people. And he got out and prayed over me right then for 5 minutes, got back in his truck and went to the front lines.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so Ephraim was with that dude while we were there. So
wow.
like we actually assisted them at one point. We'll call it, I think they called it some white phosphorus rounds or something one time when they were trying to rescue some children.
Yeah. Well, they show on. We can't show that video on the screen, but people can go Google it when he got shot.
Yeah, in the leg behind the tank.
Yeah. Which, by the way, insane cinematography on this whole thing. I'm like, dude, you couldn't have set that up any better. But wild to look at it because he was in the middle of exactly what you just laid out, where they would mow the people down.
Yes.
And you can see in the background of the video, there's literally just piles of bodies. Mm-hmm. And then there was one living little girl, and that's who, like, he and his guys went and saved. But there's no, like, the ISIS guys are the closest things to, like, actual animals I've ever personally studied. And, like, I study the Nazis a lot, and I'd say they're up there
evil.
too.
Yeah, pure evil.
Yeah.
And that was just the environment, right? And that's why I'm like, for these guys on their first deployment, like, it's a lot to take in.
Oh yeah.
Right. So I think once we started really rolling, I think some of the guys were like, dude, why are we going out all the time? Like, one of us first they were worried about one of us is going to get killed. Like, this is, we should just be staying back like we're told. And, I think there was some of that discrepancy, and then also obviously the living conditions, and then I just think a couple of them are like, we don't agree with this mission. And here's the other issue is we were what we were doing and tasked with is really a conventional mission, right? I mean, we were driving pure daylight into Mosul every day, like no sneaky peeky. It's like, here we are, we're in giant Mat Vs. So, I mean, that, I think for them, some of them were like, dude, this isn't our job. Like, this is not why I signed up to be a SEAL. Like, we should be hitting, targets at night, going in sneaky peeky, doing this. And so it's like having to explain to them, like, dude, this is what we're tasked with.
It's the job.
It's, yeah. And we're not going to stop just because you're uncomfortable with the mission or like how we're conducting business. And I get it. I'd rather go in at night too, but we're not allowed. In order to go in at night, you had to have air assets, and the fighting was so strong and fierce during the day. Like the air assets were like, no, we can't just keep going all night. Right. And you only have so much ordnance you can drop. We would go Winchester on ordnance every day from dropping Hellfires or whatever else. I mean, that's how much ordnance we were dropping on a daily basis, plus using organic weapons. So I think all that mixed in, that's what started, this hate circle. But it really, I think, and that's the other misconception that's been put out. There's like the whole platoon like turned on him or this. It was 3 individuals.
Yeah. You're still friends with some of the other guys in the platoon.
Yeah, I still talk to them. I still talk to most of the guys in the platoon. Every once in a while. But yeah, these 3 individuals were really like the cancer. That sort of, and they tried to pull everybody else in. Like,
right.
But all this, like, this is not things that I was paying attention to. I wasn't really like seeing it. Right.
Do you think you should have, or like kind of missed it, or is that really hindsight 2020?
I think. Yes, I mean, dude, perfect world scenario, I would have fired Craig Miller as the LPO. Here's the other, he wasn't my LPO at first. I had another guy that was my LPO, he's sort of like the second in charge below me, right? Well, he had picked up chief right before we deployed. And so he was doing he is the reason like everything was running as smooth as it could, because he would nip things in the butt for me. If like guys were talking shit or doing whatever, he would smack it down. But then our sister platoon chief got shot in the chest, and so they needed a platoon chief. So I sent him over there. I was like, hey, you're ready, go take over that platoon. So then Craig Miller was next in line, and that's really where the downfall of like what he didn't do was actually step up and be an LPO. He was still one of the boys with these 2 other individuals that were toxic. And so he was just feeding into that when really he should have been nipping it in the butt and being like, hey, stop.
And again, you don't really know.
And I don't know I don't really know this is going on. Right. I'm more focused on day to day, like, hey, we're going out again. I got to go and like the amount of sleep, there was no sleep for a long time. So we would come back from a mission, and then myself and the OIC would have to go debrief. And then they would bring the Iraqis in, and they would brief us on their movements the next day. And then we would attempt to advise them, which they didn't ever fucking listen to anything. But those meetings would go till 1 a.m, and then we're up at 4:30 to go back out again. So it was like, this went on for weeks and weeks and weeks.
It sounds like the combination of like lack of sleep, lack of, are we on the front line? Are we not on the front line? But there's civilians getting mowed down every day. You're trying to work with another military that also is like kind of doing things that are against the Geneva Convention, and you can't do anything about it. It feels like the fog
It's just
of
a chaotic.
War.
It's a very chaotic environment. Yeah.
Right? Like a lot going on.
I mean, in the reality though, I think we handled it very well. I mean, I think that, we once we got into our groove of like, hey, we're making some effect here. And then the partner force started loving us. I mean, I had the General Abbas who came and testified for me at my trial. He flew all the way from Iraq to testify for me, to be like, these guys are lying. I was here.
He was there that day?
Yeah.
Wow.
He's the one who brought the dead, or the ISIS prison, like not even prisoner, wounded ISIS dude to us. But he ended up really liking me because he knew I was like, yeah, well, what do you need done? I'm like, all right, we'll go get it done. And so he really like took a liking to me and was like, telling the MARSOC command, like, I want this guy out with me every day. Him and his platoon are doing good things. So everything was rocking and rolling. It was just behind the scenes, there was this
burgeoning,
little cancer that was spreading. And I really just didn't, know how bad it was until probably 5 months in, 4.5, 5 months in.
What's this, like a 6-7 month deployment?
This was 7, yeah.
Okay. So how far in did the event that eventually became the whole thing happen?
This might have been 3 months in. So,
and none of it, there weren't any problems right afterwards. All that happened way later, right?
Yeah, all this, yeah. There was nothing was brought up ever.
So these guys who are going to later claim some of the things that you're going to lay out served with you for another 4 months in combat.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
That's
and this is where
interesting.
this is where the ridiculousness of their lies, like, really just comes to fruition because of the things they were saying. So,
yeah, Leslie, by the way, can you pull up the Wikipedia page on Eddie while we're at it? Because we're going to have to go bullet point by bullet point at some point here. But
that Wikipedia page is way off, by the way.
I know. Like, they didn't put in any of the stuff that came out at court. It's just like whatever they put
of
up
course.
the first time. But anyway, so that day, you
so
said,
yeah, so that about 3 months in, 3.5 months in, we had been clearing from south to north. And so we ended up butting up against Old Mosul, which is a very historic little place in Mosul, right? It's biblical. And that's where ISIS was really just embedded in down. They were using that as a stronghold. And so we were losing our partner force daily, trying to like butt up against that. So we decided like, hey, let's change the way we're advancing. We completely moved north of Mosul, and then we were clearing from north to south. So we switched directions on them. And so it was the first day that we were going in, moving from north to south. And it couldn't have been a better day. We pulled up, and there was this little village town, I guess, before you really got into the city. And we were told before we got there, like, hey, there's a bunch of ISIS dudes in that town, just so you know. I'm like, all right, check. So we pulled up that morning, probably like at 5:36 in the morning, set up our MAP-Vs. They were set up behind these perfect positions, behind these walls where just the turret could look over. I had sniper positions set up. And what we were supposed to do is wait for the Iraqis to start clearing, pushing forward, and, observe and, help out when we could.
right.
But the Iraqis, in typical Iraqi fashion, were taking their time. 7 o'clock comes around. They're still like, oh, we're not ready. And we're watching ISIS just set up. We're like, these dudes are maneuvering around this town, like PKMs, everything's, they know what's coming. So I was like, fuck it. Like, let's do it. And we just started engaging them.
How many guys would you say there were?
Probably, 30 to 40. And
they're in the middle of civilians and stuff too?
No, this was pretty, like, this town was pretty desolate.
Okay.
It seemed, there was probably some civilians in there, but it was like clear as day. Like, they weren't even hiding it. It was like they're setting up positions. And I don't think they knew where we exactly were or what we had. Because we were only like 500-600 meters away from them.
Mm.
And so we just started lighting them up. And that went on for probably 10-15 minutes of just guys having a great time. Just turkey shoot, hitting dudes left and right. And then when we got done with that, the Iraqis then were like, oh, we're going to advance. So that obviously went pretty quick because everybody was dead. But they ended up hitting up against a building.
It is now time to go.
Yeah.
They are all dead.
Well, they ended up coming to this building that had, or no, they hadn't come to it yet, but there was a building that had about 15 ISIS fighters hiding out in there. And one of our guys got that over comms. He was like, hey, there's intel, there's dudes in there. So we dropped 2 Hellfires into it.
That'll do it.
Yeah. And so the Iraqis then pushed up to that building, and there was one survivor, and that was that ISIS fighter. So they ended up throwing him on the hood of their Humvee and driving him back to us. And so they had never done that before, or like, and so they brought him back, they threw him on the ground. He's 17, 18 years old. Nobody knows his age, but definitely not 12 or 13 like the media was putting out. This was
They were saying, I didn't even know they were saying that.
the age switched around so many times. But this, he was a kid, 16, 17, 18, but he was an ISIS fighter. But he was on death's door. You could see just looking at him, you're like, dude, this he's not going to make it.
What kind of injuries? Like bullet or
Definitely
blunt
internal.
force?
A lot of internal injuries from the explosion. I think he had a massive laceration on his left leg, and then he wasn't breathing, having agonal breathing, and so we were, they pulled him off, and we were like, all right, what are we gonna do with this dude? So I was just like, get my med bag, I'm like, treat him until he's gone, right? Because the other thing that was just going to happen is they were just going to take him back and torture him or do whatever. I think that there was like some Iraqis already pulling out their knives, like ready to, licking their chops. So
it's another thing we didn't hear in the media, that part.
Not at all.
So we ended up medically treating this dude. I criked him, which is gave him a cricothyroidotomy.
Is that like a trachea?
Yes. So it's where if he's not breathing, so like he had agonal breathing, he had, blast exposure. So I gave him that airway, put that in. And then the other medic, Corey Scott, came up. He was helping out. We ended up giving him 2 chest tubes and an interosseous because we could not get an IV or to get fluids in him. So we gave him an IO in the chest plate to get some fluids in. By that time, he was dead,
Cooked,
right?
Yeah.
I was running back, and by this time there was 2 other SEALs working on him that wanted to be medics or like wanted to get some training. So, and we pretty much were like, all right, yeah, go ahead, and the other medic will assist you and help you do a chest tube or the IO. And that's the best training you can get. It's a real world experience. So I was going back between my OIC and that, and my OIC's like, hey, what's the status? And I was like, oh, I think he's dead. And he's like, well, just check. So I went up, I thumped him, and you couldn't really tell, like, and then I like sort of smacked him to see if he'd get a response. And then I took a knife out and I poked him in the side, like a hard jab, and didn't break skin, didn't do any of that. No response.
Was that kind of standard? Like that's something you had to do before?
I hadn't, no. I think at the time I was like, dude, is this guy dead or what? Like, because I couldn't even eye thump, and he was so out of it. I just was like, if there's no stimuli from this, then he's gone, and we can just like forget about this dude. Like it's done. So that's all that was done. He was dead, and so we actually were requested to go back to base not too long after that because the Iraqis, it was like at 1:00 in the afternoon, and of course they're like, we're done for the day. And so we were like, hey, the Iraqis don't want to push anymore. We'd like to, return to base, RTB. And they were like, hey, no, we want you guys to stay out there for another, how many hours, just in case. And we're like, okay. So we were out there, nothing was going on. We were flying the drone, like trying to find targets to hit with mortars or air assets. And that's when the fuckery started happening. We were bored, and that dead body was there. So guys were going up, like taking pictures with it and just joking around. I mean, and then we ended up taking a group picture with it.
Yeah.
Right.
Which you've admitted was
yes.
wrong.
I'll admit it was not professional. And I, that's one thing I was like, hey, I'll take the hit on that for sure.
You also said though, and again, I don't think this is a good thing. Like we shouldn't be doing that, but this is something that guys did sometimes, like in the past.
Since the invention of the camera.
Yeah.
I mean, in wartime, you could go ahead and look up World War II, Vietnam, like all these things. It's been done in the past, right? But I will say on a professional level, no, it's not a professional thing to do. But we did it, right? So we ended up, we're messing around. That was it. Like literally that's all that was done, was taking pictures. And I think a couple of the guys were flying the drone like around him, seeing how close I could get to his face. This is how board team guys.
Is there any shit talk going on with the guys who you felt were more cancerous at this time? Is there any signal that anything's wrong?
Nothing is said. And this is what's hilarious. Craig Miller, who's the head of the cancerous thing, right? And he's the one that NSW holds up in this like high, like, oh, such a moral and ethical dude. He was over there kicking the guy in the face, like doing shit to him too, right?
Is there any video? Like someone was taking video at some point, but do we have any video of that?
So this is what's crazy, is TC Byrne had his helmet cam on the whole time. So there's video of me coming up with the med bag, opening it, starting to
seen
work
that.
on that guy,
Yeah,
right?
I think I've seen that.
But then it shuts off at a certain point, and that's it. Where I wish I was like, where's the rest of that video? And I know it was there. I know that everything was recorded, but what TC, Craig Miller, and them did is delete everything from that point on.
OTC was one of the guys.
Yeah. So that's why there's no rest of that video. And I didn't have the video. They were in control of it. No.
Is that standard for someone to have a helmet? Always have at least one guy with a helmet cam on the teams, or was that just random that he happened to have it?
It was more the guys wanted just to get content.
Get content.
Yeah, like they all there was probably 3 or 4 of them that had helmet cams. That
Gary V would be proud. There you go.
Yeah.
Content. War content.
But that's even I briefed them on that too. Like I was like, hey, you guys shouldn't have this isn't we're not out here making fucking YouTube videos. Like why I don't understand why you guys they were so fixated on putting my camera. So like if we got contacted, I'm like, hey, contact right. The first thing you do is face right with your rifle at the ready. They would go right to their camera and then,
That's what you would do, Jim, right? You throw the camera on first?
I would not. And then once again,
maybe.
Generational thing as well, I guess. But yeah, that video, like there's probably more to it, but they deleted it. And I'm sure it would show a lot more. And the reason they deleted it is because they would be culpable for their actions as well.
Very convenient,
yeah.
too. It was there was a similar thing like with the Blackwater 4 guys where the drone conveniently turned off.
Yes.
Well, I forget what the minutes was. I'll get it wrong. But before the shit goes down. So it's kind of the same thing with you. That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah. And I to this day I don't know who deleted that video. It could have been NCIS that did it. It could have been the prosecution. I mean, there was so much corruption and deceit going on. Like it could have been any of them. But
no fireworks right after. Everything's cool.
Nope. So the only thing that happened afterwards is we went back and the Craig Miller had a little meeting with the guys, which the LPO usually does, just to delegate and hey, this is what we need to do. Gio, my good friend Gio, who was a Marine that was attached to us, and I'll just say, rest in peace. He committed suicide last month. But
Sorry,
he was in there and he heard Craig say, those pictures that we took are war crimes and we need to get, that's not right. And even though he was in the pictures, right? Which, okay. But Gio, I guess, was like, hey, dude, you should not throw the word war crimes around. That's not a war crime. And that's not right. I wasn't involved in that meeting, but I got told afterwards, Corey Scott's actually the one who came up to me and was like, hey, there's some, shit going on about the pictures. Guys are sort of divide, I guess Craig's we should delete them. Other guys are like, I don't want to delete mine. I want to keep it.
But Corey's the one that came up and told you.
Yes.
This. Interesting.
So I was like, all right. So I ended up calling all the E6s, in the platoon had a meeting with them. I was like, what's going on? And they were like, hey, the guys are worried about the pictures. And I was like, okay, delete them. I was like, just get rid of them. And I even said, I was like, probably shouldn't have done it. Get rid of them and call it what it is. The problem is some guys were like, nope, I'm keeping it. Mm-hmm. They liked it. And then some guys wanted it deleted. So all I knew is I put out delete it and we'll continue mission, whatever, just another day. And that was the end of it. It never brought up again. There wasn't no discussions. The only other time that during that deployment where I was like, all right, what the fuck's going on is when I lived. So I lived with the OIC and the JO, who's a junior officer, lived with us as well when he was there. And I had asked to borrow his phone. We had in-country phones, and I wanted to text somebody back at Erbil to make sure they brought up some supply I forget what it was, when they were coming back the next week. I had opened up his phone, and it was a text thread already on there, and I saw my name right off the bat, and I was like, oh. And so, of course, my curiosity, I'm reading it, and it's Craig Miller, DeLay, and I think Dalton. They're like, fuck Eddie. It was just talking all this shit about me. And we don't want to, Craig should be in charge. We want to go out with, blah, blah, blah. And this is to this junior officer. So the junior officer walks in and I was like, hey, what's this? And so right away he's like, "Oh, I don't know." And
He
he's
shit
like,
himself.
"Yeah." So I was like, "This needs to be nipped in the bud." So I called another meeting, went down. I actually drove to Erbil. I canceled the operation the next day. I was like, "We're gonna solve this." So I drove up there with my OIC.
Nice scenic drive through the
Yeah,
countryside.
that's right. And so I had a meeting with all of them, and it came to like, I was like, "What is the issue here? What is the problem?" And the one guy who was talking the most trash on the text thread, he was just like, "Oh," and I was like, "Let's meet." He's like, "I don't know, I'm just pissed," and I was like, "Well, let's talk."
Is this Corey?
No, this is another guy named Joe,
Okay.
who really was just like not part of it. He was just getting wrapped up in it. And so I talked to him. I'm like, "Dude, what are the issues?" And really, there was no issue. He even admitted it. He's like, "Dude, it's just we're coming back here, and the hate circle starts and whatever, And I'm like, "Okay." I was like, "Well, do you understand the mission? I'm like, why we're doing this every day?" And he's like, "Yes." And I was like, "So you guys are just tired, whatever?" And he's like, "Yeah." And so I was like, "Okay." I was like, "Is there anything else?" "No." "Cool." We went back out. Everything was like, "Hey, I realized, I think we all agreed at that point. It was like, like I said, we're like 5 months in. Hey, we're all tired. Everybody's beat down. We've been working hard." I'm like, "But let's finish this deployment off strong, clean slates. Let's just like try and cut the drama out." I was like, "I will try and fix things, I guess, on my end, like, you know, but the reality is this: we cannot stop going until the mission is complete."
They were obviously on this chain though. They're complaining about you like in general.
Yes.
They're not pointing to like the one event with the guy. That's not even like discussed in that, or is it?
Which guy?
The ISIS guy
No,
and that. So
none
that's
of that.
not discussed.
None of that is discussed.
They're
It's
just
literally
discussing their
so. And what I found out later is, and this is from Geo and some other guys in platoon. Everything that happened on that deployment was my fault. It could have rained, and they're like, "Fucking Eddie." Like, they were putting everything on me. I was making them go out every day. Everything bad that happened, to the point where if they lost something, they're like, "Eddie stole it." That started becoming a rumor. They're like, "He's stealing things from people," and I didn't know about this either. And I was like, until I
is
got
this
back.
like Red Bulls and power bars and shit?
Dude, this is so petty.
Again, the ugly girl on the bar thing.
Yeah.
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 It was, well, at the time, it was like Craig had lost a pair of sunglasses. Immediately, Eddie stole them.
Oh, you stole them.
And here's the thing. He found them under his bed 2 weeks later, but didn't like saying, just like, "Oh, somebody put,"
You put
he
'em
said
there.
somebody, yeah.
Put him back.
He said, "I put him back."
Yeah. Yeah.
So I stole them for 2 weeks and then I put them back.
Right.
These are all
Were
just,
they at least Versace's? Like, were they nice?
these are they're typical SEAL gators is what they were.
Gators.
Yeah.
What were they running you? Like $50?
Oh no, those are about 150. They're expensive.
Oh,
yeah,
that's up there. That's
Yeah.
out of my price
Yeah.
range.
Which is a misdemeanor. And
Yes.
he could have been charged with that theft.
Yes, that's
But he
right.
did return it, so it's only half price.
And then here's another one.
Ridiculous.
I'll skip to, so all that was going on, right? We had that final meeting. We ended up clearing Mosul. We had about 3 weeks left of deployment, and so it was nothing else was going on. So I was like, "Hey, this is a perfect chance. Take this 3 weeks, decompress while we're here. We're probably not going to get tasked with too much, but we did end up getting tasked with. So the next city they were going to take was Talafar. They were like, "Hey, we want you guys to go get eyes on Talafar and just like observe, report back anything." Simple task, right? We go up to the forward line of advance and just keep eyes on it. So I went out there twice, and it was, you're watching just Talafar, some dudes mill about, but you really like, that's not a chance. You're not going to drop ordnance or do anything kinetic. It's like just reporting back. So I told Craig, I was like, "So everybody wants him to be in charge." I was like, "Hey, you go out on this next one, be the TAC lead." I was like, "You're running the show. I'm going to stay back." And he was like, "Oh, okay." They go out. They end up killing 4 innocent civilians. They come back, and this gets reported to me. I get a phone call like, "Hey, this happened." So they show back up, and I'm like, what the fuck? And so what happened is another guy, Josh Varenz, who was one of the dudes, he said he spotted an ISIS fighter 1,000 meters away aiming a gun at him. So what they did is it's
1,000 meters,
Yeah.
aiming a gun.
yes, that's through his sniper rifle. They launched a Switchblade, which is a remote control little airplane with a ordnance on it, which you can control and fly into, whoever or a building. They launched that and land that into the group of people that Vren said was, pointing guns at him. It turns out it was like a couple kids and 2 dudes, and they smoked them all. So
And they weren't aiming guns at him?
No, these were civilians. So I get told this, and this is like probably the most pissed I was because I didn't go out. The one time I didn't go out, and I was like, this is on me. Like, I should have fucking been there. But either way, they come back. I'm like, what happened? They tell me what happened, and I'm like, listen, the problem is you guys, they lied and reported up something else to MARSOC. So I had to drive down to the MARSOC command, and I'm trying to smooth this out. And I'm trying to help them out. I'm like, dude, what are we going to do about this? And they're like, dude, these guys are fucked. Like, they reported this, and this is what actually happened. So I went back, and I even helped them out. I was like, dude, you guys need to get what happened, get your story straight, and you're going to get investigated when we get back, but you need to stick to your story. And that's it. I was like, I have, my name is Paul. This is between y'all. I was like, I wasn't there, but this is my advice to you. This is what you need to do. Ended up, they got investigated when they got back, and it all got squashed. Like, so we're just like,
That's
whatever.
convenient.
Yes. And which that incident wasn't allowed to be brought up in my trial either.
Why not?
Because surprisingly enough, before the trial, they classified it. And they were like, oh, that's classified now. And
So were those guys witnesses at the trial?
Yeah.
Against you? So
Oh, yeah.
no chance to impeach the witness with a very
You
clear.
can't
and they
bring
had
up-
full immunity. Yeah. So
So
actually,
they classified it before. Was it right before the trial?
yeah, because we were like, we have evidence of the really only war crime that happened was done by one of the witnesses,
Accusers.
the accusers.
Yeah.
And that's when they were like, and that's classified.
And you tried to help them.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
like any chief,
Yeah.
any chief's got to look out for his guys
Yep.
and be like, "Hey, I don't want to see anybody get burned. This is war. I've been doing enough." I'm like, I realize mistakes happen. So yeah, I mean, we ended up finishing off the deployment.
Is it tense at all? Like, because you
Yeah,
saw the text,
the last 3 weeks were just weird, man. Like I was like, I did not like these dudes. And I was, but I was like, hey, you got to finish out the deployment. I really just didn't, I wasn't hanging out with them. These guys had built a bar up on the roof of the mansion because by this time we're back in Erbil. So we're done. We're allowed to go back to Erbil. We're chilling in this mansion. We're finally like living in AC and have all the amenities for the last 3 weeks of deployment, which I was fine with. I'm like, dude, I'm just going to work out, get healthy. I had lost, I don't know how much weight during that deployment. So these guys built a bar up on the roof. And so they were going up there every night, just getting hammered and like having a good time. But I was like, dude, I'm not going up there. I had no like desire to hang around them. I was so sick to my stomach of just like dealing with their bullshit that I was like, dude, I'm just going to finish this out and be done with it. And so,
but everyone else you're okay with.
yeah, like the other dudes, I mean, it was sort of just like, hey, what's up, blah, blah, blah. And I think everybody at that point was, they're worn out and everybody's just like, dude, trying to do their own thing and just get ready to go home.
Right.
It wasn't like super intense in the house. It was just known by that time it was known that Craig Miller and them didn't like me and I didn't like them. So it was like, oh, the chief doesn't like the LPO. There's a bad relationship there.
What month are we in here, if you don't mind?
This will be near the 6th going on 7th.
Yeah, but what month of the year?
Oh,
like is this still 2017?
No, this is maybe it is 2017 still.
Like either late 2017 or early 2018.
Yeah, I apologize. I can't.
No, it's all good. Just like in that range. At
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So it might have been 2017 still. Yeah, that makes sense because we got there at the beginning of the year and then we got home later on, like 7 months later. So I think it was till 2017.
Okay.
But
But the last few weeks, you're just kind of staying separate from them. They're doing their thing, you're doing yours, and less actions going on.
Yeah,
so
and I'm
chilling.
and I'm dealing with sending the upcoming like the platoon that was coming to relieve us. I'm sending back reports to the platoon chief, just doing what I got to do. And then I'm talking to my wife Andrea, and our daughter was 16 at the time. And they were having some issues. They were, teenage
16-year-old girl and her mom? No way.
Like, and so Andrea, God bless her, man. Like, I have never come home from a deployment, or I've actually always stayed the latest one to stay on deployment. Like, she's never asked me for anything, and she was like, "I need help. I can't. Like, I'm done." I think she was just fed up. So I was like, "All right, I'm gonna see if I'll get on the first flight out of here to get home," which is actually like. Not unheard of, but usually I would stay to the last flight.
Right.
But I ran it up to the master chief of the team. I'm like, hey, dude, my wife's, we're having some family issues, whatever. Is it okay if I go home on the first flight? I was like, I already sent everything I need to for the next platoon coming in. And he was like, oh, yeah, dude. Yeah, for sure.
So now they're going to say you abandoned your platoon.
So I went home on the first flight. They're like, this guy, piece. So when the next platoon came in, it was like, dude, Eddie's a piece of shit. Like, he left on the first. It was, and then they went to my OIC. So when I left on the first flight, my OIC told me they all went to him, and they were like,
"This is a guy you got along with."
Yes, they're like, Eddie's been manipulating you the whole time. He's fucking, he was also talking shit about you. Like, these are all like high school rumors that they're pulling. And Jake, who was the OIC, he told me this when he got home, and he was like, hey, dude, this is what they're doing. And they almost had me, but then I was like, what the fuck, this doesn't make any sense. And I was like, dude, okay. So I waited till the whole platoon got home, and then I had one last little meeting with them. And I was like, all right, you guys are still carrying this BS on. I'm hearing from other guys in other platoons that you guys are going around telling them like that I'm a thief and that I was doing, like, there was multiple rumors that they had spread. So I'm like, I want to address, like, please tell me, what did I steal? I want it, because I've never been labeled as a thief. And I was like, I took offense to that. Yeah. The other rumors that they were spreading that I was like dangerous and like tactically like, aggressive, too aggressive. I was like, great. I was like, when you guys are platoon chiefs, you run it your way.
You're like, thank you for that.
With all of your experience, your vast experience. But I was like, I do want to know what I stole. And that's when they were like, well, there was a Red Bull in the fridge 6 months ago, and it became a big deal because it went missing. And I'm like, God. Dude, I don't even know if I took that Red Bull or not, man. I was like, is this seriously? And then, and this is how petty it is, dude. So
you imagine telling this to George Patton.
Yeah, exactly.
So then I had arranged, during that deployment, I got a company called Badass Boxes to send us care packages twice a month. And I mean, these were legit care packages. Like anything I sent this chick, she sent to us, right? So what I would do is go around the whole platoon like, hey, what do you guys want? What do you guys want? Blah, blah, blah. And then they accused me of taking power bars out of the care packages that weren't mine, which I was like, dude, I'm the one who ordered all this shit for you guys. So then it went
Took
to
our power bars.
Yeah, then the sunglasses thing got brought up.
Oh my God.
It was like, you stole my sunglasses, and Craig Miller's like, you stole them, and I'm like, well, I don't have them. He's like, well, I have them now. And then the JO,
How did
Tom
these
McNeil
guys become SEALs?
Well, Tom McNeil, who's the junior officer, was like, he didn't even say it. Somebody said it for him. They're like, you owe somebody money for a haircut. And I was like, I only got one haircut on that deployment near the end of the deployment before I redeployed. And I was like, Tom, you paid for it. I went with you because we went out into a Iraqi mall and got it done.
You went to an Iraqi mall and got a haircut?
Oh, in Erbil, yeah. Oh, dude, best haircuts you'll ever
Really?
get. Oh, by far.
You learn something new every day.
It's a man spa. So
what using an AK to fucking
they massage you. They burn all the hair on your ears. It's legit.
Iraqi salons.
Yeah,
Stick it
bro.
on the list.
It's worked for me for many years.
All right.
So, I look at Tom. I'm like, I do owe you money for that haircut. You paid for it. I forgot. And he's like, well, I don't even care. I'm like, obviously you do because he's saying it for you. So this is all stuff that's built up. So at the end of this meeting, I let them all get it out. I'm like, is there anything else? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, here's the deal. I was like, I know you don't like me. I was like, and I don't fucking like you. I was like, I haven't liked some of you for a long time. I was like, I think you're fucking weak. I think you fucking, like, you're cowards. I was like, but here's what we can do. I was like, there's a fight room right over here. I was like, let's go in there and I'll fight every one of you. And you'll beat me up. I'm like, I'm not going to be able to take every one of you. But I was like, let's just get it out. Get it out of our system and like move on. And none of them would step up. They were like, and I was like, let's go. So if I was like, all right, if you guys don't want to solve it that way, then I suggest you drop this baby bullshit, go decompress for the next, because you're going to have 2 weeks of leave. And I was like, this is normal. I'm like, this is normal coming back from a combat deployment. You're stressed. You have to decompress. Everybody's worked up. I'm like, just go do that and we'll call it. And I was like, and I told him, I was like, I'm your platoon chief. I'm still going to take care of you. If you guys need, because, guys go to different commands or you have to give orders. I'm like, if you guys need help getting to a certain place, I will do what I can for you. I even got, so I had Craig Miller, who was the LPO. I went to a ranking board where all the chiefs have to rank the LPOs to see who's going to pick up chief or whatever.
Yeah.
And I ranked him number 3. I kept him there. And I came down. What was funny is I came down and he's sitting there in the team room. He's like, oh, did you just come from the board? I'm like, yep. And he's like, oh. And he's like milling about. I'm like, do you want to know where I ranked you, Craig? And he's like, yeah. I was like, you got number 3, dude. I'm like, I got you number 3, which is good. You're going to get promoted. And he's like, oh, man. And this is the weirdest part. He's like, I'm just so sorry. I don't know, man. And I was like, listen, dude. I was like, me and you are never going to be friends. I was like, we were. I was cool with you until you accused me. You accused me of stealing from you, dude, to the whole platoon. Mm-hmm. I was like, we cannot. Like, we're work companions. I'm gonna help you out, but I was like, off duty, dude. You don't know my fucking name. I'm like, I don't respect you, and that's it. And so, maybe and that's another thing I could have handled differently. But at that point, I was like, dude, fuck you guys.
Unless he's fucking dying over here.
So
could have handled that one differently.
We ended up dispersing. I got sent to TRADET to be the senior enlisted advisor for urban combat. And while I'm there, this is about 7 months after the deployment.
So midway through 18, maybe something like that.
Yeah, it was probably like March or April of 18.
Okay.
I get pulled aside and they're like, hey, you're under investigation. And I was like, for what?
You're like the fucking power bars.
They're like laws of armed conflict, war crime. And I'm like, well,
Christ.
what is, I was like, so what do I, okay. I'm like, and I don't even know what it's like, what it's about at this point. And so I'm like, what do I do? And they're like, well, we're pulling you from your position. You're not going to be the senior enlisted advisor. We're just going to put you in this office until this investigation gets settled. So I'm like, all right, well, can you give me some advice? And this was like the master chief who was in charge, the new master chief that was in charge of me. And he's like, nope. He's like, you're on your own. He's like, and this is what he said to me in the office. He's like, if they're saying what you did is true, then you need to own up to it. And I'm like, well, I need to know what they're saying. He's like, I'm not talking to you. Mm. And so right away, I got this like vibe, like, oh shit,
sinister.
Like, yeah, you're already accused. Like, I'm guilty, right?
Yeah.
So I end up going and hiring. Well, I went and talked to a buddy, and I was like, hey, dude, what do I do? And he's like, you need to get a lawyer on standby just in case. So,
and you don't even know what you're defending yet.
No. But I ended up, he had a lawyer that he hooked me up with who was a retired lieutenant colonel, and he belonged to a group called United American Patriots. It was a nonprofit, kind of like what we do now, except I'll get to this. I end up talking to him, and he's like, yeah, okay, yeah, we'll represent you if this thing goes forward. You won't pay a dime. This is what we do as a nonprofit. So I met with him and another lawyer named Phil Stackhouse, and they were like, cool. I sort of gave them everything. I'm like, I don't know what they're coming after me for, but I gave them the whole story from the deployment. I'm like, this is what's going on.
Did they ever stop you at anything that happened, even including like the one with the guy, and say like, was there anything else there, or like try to zero in on it and what someone could possibly be trying to accuse you of, or was it just like pretty standard?
It was like war crime, like law of armed conflict. There was no.
No. I mean, I'm sorry. I should ask that more clearly. When you're talking with your lawyers and you're taking them, day by day as best you can across the 7 months, were there any events in there, possibly including the event it ended up being, where they stopped you and said, "Ooh, tell me more about that. Maybe they're trying to accuse you of this."
Every day was an event. So it was like, in my mind, I'm like, dude, it could be anything, right? I'm like, I don't know what, it was a freaking chaotic deployment. That incident was like the last thing on my mind. That wasn't even in my thought process. So these guys said, like, hey, we'll help you out. We're, if this thing furthers, we'll be your lawyers. So again, I'm back, I go back, I'm checking into work, no job. No one's like, I start getting shunned more and more. They're like, hey, we want you to move across the street to this other office. And like, it literally, it was weird, man. Like, nobody would talk to me. And then, of course, I already knew the rumors were spreading. Like, and here's the thing. The SEAL teams is like the biggest sorority ever.
I'm getting that vibe. Sorry.
It's just fucking, it's a bunch of women. And well, actually, no, they're worse than women, dude. And so I was hearing guys were coming.
I can see the headlines now. Eddie Gallagher, sexist sport criminal.
Yeah. I was having dudes come up to me that I knew, and they're like, hey, man, I heard that you were stepping on babies' heads, or like, then I heard you raped a woman. And I'm like, what? Like, this is the teams. It's the telephone game, and it just, the things keep escalating. So I'm like, dude, this is so out of control. But at the same time, there's nothing you can, like, you can't like go out and just defend. You're like, hey, this isn't going on. So I just like, all right, I'm just gonna keep my mouth shut and let this thing play out. And that's what I was told to do too. Everyone's like, just trust the process. Trust the process. You'll be fine. So it wasn't until I get called into work. So now I'm over at Supply, which
Supply.
I'm like in an office doing nothing. And so I get called. The XO of Supply was a SEAL. He's like, hey, I want to talk to you tomorrow morning. I get a call, come in. I haven't met you yet, or we haven't got a chance to converse. So I'm like, okay. So I get up the next morning, get my uniform on, show up 15 minutes prior, waiting outside of his office. I knock at 07:30, and he opens it, and there's 6 NCIS agents in there. Ugh. They grab me. They're like, empty your pockets. They handcuff me, and they're like, we're taking you to interrogation. And I was like, okay. And so they're all postured, like waiting for me. They thought I was going to like start trying to fight all of them. I could tell right off the bat. I was like, you can just sense it. They're all like on edge. And I was like, dude, why are you guys handcuffing me? They're like, oh, this is procedure. No, it's not. They marched me in front of the whole command handcuffed, which automatically makes you look, like guilty. They take me to an interrogation room. I'm in there, and they're like, hey, do you know why you're here? And I was like, I know I'm under investigation, but that's it. And they're like, okay, well, we want to talk to you. I was like, and I was polite as possible. I was like, I don't want to be a dick to you guys, but I want my lawyer. Like, I'm not talking to you without a lawyer. And so like, all right. They walk out, shut the door and lock it, and don't let me out for another 7 hours. During this time, they raided my house. So my wife wasn't home. They had a whole assault team like come, and it was probably like 25 kitted up NCIS agents, raid my house, point guns in my kids' faces, pull them out in the street in their underwear.
Your kids?
Yes, my 8-year-old son, and then at the time he had just turned 18, which is their excuse of why they did that. They're like, well, there was an adult in there, and they knew he had just turned 18. So I don't know any of this is going on. I'm just in the interrogation room.
Where was your wife? So
she was at a brunch with a friend. She gets a call from a neighbor. She's like, I think the neighbor called her, but she was like, hey, your kids are out in the street in their underwear with guns pointed at them. They blocked off every street. They're yelling at everybody to get back inside. They're like ransacking your house. So she's like, what the fuck? So she drives back. They immediately start interrogating her. They pull her in a van, and they're like, your husband's a murderer. And she's like, well, who did he murder? I'm like, what? Who did he murder? And she's like, they're like ISIS. This is no shit. So my wife is like, do you not know what he does for a living? Like, she's like, this is a joke.
ISIS.
But they were trying to get her to, they're like, do you know anything, this and that? My wife's like, no, like, I don't pay attention.
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah. And at this point, I really wasn't telling my wife everything that was going on, but she knew. I was like, there's some bullshit going on. And, and I actually did tell her, like, I didn't get along with those dudes in the platoon, like those one.
Oh, but you hadn't told her about the pending.
Because I really was like,
you weren't sure what it was.
I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
I told her I got a lawyer. I was like, hey,
you did tell her that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
All right, so she knew something.
She knew, so yeah, but she was like, hey, I don't pay attention to rumors. I'm not going to talk about anything. And so they raided our house, did all that. I ended up getting released out of an interrogation room. I go back, and that's when I found out what happened.
What's going through your mind when you find out your kids were pulled out at gunpoint?
I was like in such like irate shock because I had to have my oldest son walk me through. I was like, dude. Because he was like, they pointed guns in my face. And I'm like, no fucking way they did. I was like, you're just exaggerating that. And they're like, I was like, walk me through exactly what happened. And he walked me through and like, they did. And I was like, so they had the gun pointed at your head and Ryan's. Yes. Oh, so in my mind, I'm like, these are NCIS agents who they're the biggest nerds of, they claim they're like, oh, we're just like the FBI. They're all flunkies out of every other 3-letter agency. Then they go to the NCIS. They are a bunch of like just geeks that want to make careers out of like taking down better men than themselves. Does
this sound like out of the context of like what proper procedure would ever be? Jim?
Yeah, because it's just why do you have to? You hit the nail on the head with NCIS. Why do you have to do that? There's no point of that.
Well, no threat.
You're looking for him, and
so
that's it.
Well, they also know he's with them.
Correct.
Here's why they did it, and this is, you can see this in it, like the way our government acts now. It's a scare tactic. They do that to you. It separates you from everybody else. So all of our neighbors, everybody that we've known, they're
must have done something wrong.
You did something. They just don't do that to anybody. So then nobody talks to you. And what they're trying to do is put a divide in your family. Like, this is happening to you because it's your husband's fault. And so they want your family to just like completely leave you alone. And it works, because I've talked to other guys it's happened to. It works. It'll fracture a family like no other. And yeah, it's just, all it is to drive fear into, anybody that would stand up for you is now no longer, they're like, I don't want that happening to me.
Wasn't that raid also on September 11th?
So no, this happened before then. So after the raid,
right.
After that happened, I went into work the next day, and I requested to talk to the Group 1 Master Chief.
You went back to work?
Yeah. I was like, I want answers, because this just happened to my family, and nobody at work is saying anything. No leadership is like, hey, dude, are you doing okay? Like, we heard what happened. It's like completely, you're on your fucking own. So
and you're not charged at that point. So
No.
that's hence why they put him in handcuffs, which is absolute nonsense. Yeah. But at the same time, you're not charged. So you're now they're searching your house, which happens all the time. We search people's house very respectfully. We don't throw anything, dump anything. Yeah. We don't bother. Families very well respected. That's the difference.
Yeah.
So, right. They want you to be a pariah, and they want everybody to see it.
Yes.
So it just adds to your story. It adds to the legend of you being a murderer.
Exactly. And you can imagine the rumors that went on. So, and then, of course, while they're raiding my house, they go into my garage. I have all my kit bags and everything in there. So I live in California. So they're pulling out my 30-round magazines. Like, these are illegal. They stack them up. We'll charge him with, he has 25 magazines. We're going to charge him with whatever, 25 counts of this.
They want to add whatever charges they possibly can to make it look
carrying
worse.
10 years.
Whatever they can find
each of those
to throw spaghetti. It's like throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks, right?
Yep.
They found a blue body grenade, which is a training grenade that we use. They called EOD to come.
Made a scene.
EOD drives up into their EOD fucking vehicle. Their suits and everything. My buddy, who's a Master Chief, drove to my house because my wife called him, and she's like, what the fuck? So he drives there. They're about to like do this whole, bomb fucking thing. And my buddy walks in and picks it up. He's like, it's a training grenade. And they're like
in their Hurt Locker equipment and shit.
Yeah.
This is how dumb they are. So you can imagine like the rumors that spread then through the teams, like because I went back and like, dude, I heard they found fucking rockets in his house and like this and this. So I went in the next day. I talked to the Group 1 Master Chief. I'm like, dude, explain to me why this is happening to me. He was like, no. He's like, so I had picked up, I got selected for Senior Chief. He was like, nope, you're not picking up Senior Chief either. He made me sign a piece of paper.
But you still got selected for it even through all this? Wow.
Yeah, because this is all like, I got #1 chief out of the whole team. I had nothing but like
is in place. It's still rolling.
I had all these accolades. They're like, yeah, he's picking up Senior Chief. But then,
well, you know, O.J. Simpson ran for 11,000, so you know
that's true. So yeah, like all this shit happens, right? I'm again like in purgatory still. Like no one's talking to me. So at this point, I moved my wife and kids to Florida, where we're at. I go down there, help them move in. And I was just going to go back to San Diego. I had a year left on my enlistment, and then I was done. I was going to retire. So I fly back, and I'm staying with a buddy, and I end up going to TBI clinic at Camp Pendleton, Intrepid Spear, and it's
you had a TBI.
Multiple, yeah. Everybody does in the teams, and so you go to these things before you get out to get a full head to toe assessment. So that way you get it annotated in your record and be like, hey, this is I need to be taken care of, you know, in some form or fashion. That's when I was in that TBI clinic. It's a 4-week whole process. And the second week I was in there on September 11th, NCIS, and they come in and arrest me out of the TBI clinic and throw me in military prison.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.